On September 11, 2001, a big attack happened in the United States. It was the deadliest in U.S. history. 4 planes were taken by a group of 19 men. These men belonged to a group called Al-Qaeda. They planned to crash the planes into important buildings. 2 planes hit the Twin Towers in New York City. 1 plane hit the Pentagon, which is a government building in Washington, D.C. Another plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania after people fought the attackers. More than 2,900 people died in these attacks. This included police, firefighters, and many others. Many rushed to help and lost their lives. The attacks caused sadness and shock across the world. Countries worked together to stop such attacks from happening again. This day is remembered as 9/11. It changed the way the U.S. and other countries think about safety and fighting terror. The September 11th attacks were carefully planned. 19 men trained for the mission. They learned to fly planes and studied how to avoid being caught. On the morning of September 11, 2001, 4 planes were taken over by the men. They forced the pilots to give up control. The first plane hit the North Tower of the Twin Towers at 8:46 a.m. The second plane hit the South Tower a few minutes later. Both towers caught fire and fell down soon after. This caused a lot of destruction and killed many people inside the buildings. The third plane hit the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. around 9:37 a.m. This building is very important for the U.S. government. The fourth plane, Flight 93, was heading to another target, but the passengers tried to stop the attackers. The plane crashed in a field. The passengers on Flight 93 were very brave. They worked together to fight the attackers. This stopped the plane from reaching its target. These acts of courage saved many lives. But sadly, all the people on the plane died when it crashed. The attacks showed how much harm could be done by such plans. They also showed how people can work together in tough times. The attacks were planned by a group called Al-Qaeda. This group was led by a man named Osama bin Laden. He wanted to hurt the U.S. Bin Laden blamed the U.S. for problems in his part of the world. He thought attacking the U.S. would make it weak. A man named Khalid Sheikh Mohammed also helped with the plan. He thought of using planes as weapons to cause harm. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed worked with Al-Qaeda to train the men for the mission. They learned how to fly and prepare for the attack. The men who joined the plan came from different places. Most were from Saudi Arabia. Others came from nearby countries. These men were picked because they were willing to give up their lives. They believed they were helping their group's cause. Before the attack, some of the men lived in the U.S. They acted like normal people to avoid being caught. They learned how to fly planes and stayed in small groups. They used code words to send secret messages about their plans. Al-Qaeda gave the men money and support to carry out the attack. This helped them get what they needed to complete the plan. Before the attacks, the hijackers made careful plans. They moved to the U.S. in small groups to avoid getting noticed. Many of them stayed in different cities, pretending to live normal lives. They took flight lessons to learn how to fly planes. Some men went to flight schools where they learned how to control big planes. They spent months getting ready for the attack. The hijackers used secret codes to talk about their plans. They wrote messages that seemed normal but had hidden meanings. For example, they used words like school to mean training and exam to mean the attack. This way, no one knew what they were planning. One message said, "The first semester starts soon." This meant they were almost ready for the attack. The September 11th attacks caused great harm. The Twin Towers in New York fell down after being hit by planes. Many people who worked in the buildings died. Some could not escape in time. Others were hurt by falling glass and fire. In total, about 2,750 people died in New York. The falling towers also damaged other nearby buildings in the city. In Washington, the Pentagon was hit by another plane. This caused a large fire. Many workers in the building were killed or injured. The fourth plane crashed in Pennsylvania because passengers tried to stop the hijackers. Everyone on the plane died, but they saved many others. Police, firefighters, and rescue workers rushed to help. Over 400 of them lost their lives while trying to save others. The attacks shocked the whole world. People watched the news and saw the damage. Many countries sent their support to the U.S. Families who lost loved ones felt deep sadness. Ceremonies were held to remember those who died in the attacks. The events of 9/11 changed how people think about safety. They showed how dangerous terror attacks can be. The men behind the attacks wanted to hurt the U.S. because they were angry at its actions in their countries. Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda, believed the U.S. was weak. He thought an attack would scare the country. He also wanted to push the U.S. out of other nations. Bin Laden believed this would make his group stronger in those areas. Bin Laden used past events to decide on the plan. He saw the U.S. leave Lebanon after a big bombing in 1983. He also noticed how the U.S. left Somalia in 1993 after soldiers were attacked. These events made him think the U.S. could be scared. Bin Laden called the U.S. a paper tiger. This means he thought it looked strong but was weak inside. The attack was also part of a bigger plan to hurt the U.S. al-Qaeda, wanted to spread fear, and change the way the world worked. By attacking important buildings, they hoped to cause trouble for the U.S. and make their group seem powerful. The attacks were meant to send a message. They wanted people to think al-Qaeda was strong and able to fight big nations. After the attacks, the U.S. and other countries acted quickly. They wanted to stop more attacks from happening. The U.S. started a war on terror to find and stop terrorist groups like al-Qaeda. They sent soldiers to Afghanistan. Afghanistan was where al-Qaeda's leaders were hiding. The U.S. worked with other countries to capture these leaders. Many nations helped by sharing information and stopping money for terrorists. This teamwork made it harder for attacks to happen. In the U.S., new rules were made to keep people safe. Airports added strict checks for travelers and their bags. The government also created the Department of Homeland Security to protect the country from danger. People across the world showed support for the U.S. after the attacks. They sent kind messages and helped in many ways. Countries stood together to fight terror and make the world safer. The attacks changed how nations worked with each other. The response to 9/11 showed the power of unity. Even in hard times, people came together to protect and help one another.